You are clear for launch. And with that, shut down your visors, O2 on, and prepare for ignition, 202. Copy that, and
Hey, it's Mr. Rushoff again. Alright, in our last lesson we discussed how to make a references page in version 7 of APA. In this lesson we're going to look at the other side of the citation process, the in-text citation. While the references page lets your reader quickly see all the sources that you use in your paper, the in-text citation shows the reader where in your paper you used each of these sources. Now, while you will always have both a references page and in-text citations, the in-text citation is absolutely the most important part. Now, if you forget to list a source in your references page, your instructor is going to take points off, but it actually isn't plagiarism. Now, don't get me wrong, you still need to list all of your sources in your references page. Not doing so will affect your overall grade, and teachers like me will probably give you an incomplete if you leave out too many sources. However, missing even a single in-text citation in your paper is plagiarism. Remember, plagiarism is attempting to pass over someone else's words or ideas as your own. So when you use information from a source but you do not tell your reader where you got it from, they may believe that these are your words and ideas. It's important to understand that plagiarism doesn't need to be intentional. The writer has a responsibility to make sure that every use of a source in a paper has been properly cited. And plagiarism is a big deal. Not only will it almost always result in failing, you can actually be kicked out of college. Even Harvard University states in its student's handbook that plagiarism can result in a student being withdrawn from the university for at least a year. But the consequences can extend out of school. Stephen Ambrose was at one point one of the nation's most premier historians on World War II. He was the advisor on Spielberg's movie Saving Private Ryan, and his book, Band of Brothers, became an award-winning series on HBO. Yet in 2002, it was discovered he had plagiarized a section of one of his books. This led to a further investigation that found that 6 of his books he had plagiarized and his PhD dissertation. In 1 year, Stephen Ambrose went from being a heralded historian to being called a vampire in the press. So we never want this to happen to you, and one of the best ways to avoid plagiarism is through good in-text citations. Now, APA uses what is called an author date citation system. This means that you will list the author's name and the date of publication for each piece of information that you got from a source in the paragraph in which you used it. To do this, APA uses 2 different formats, the parenthetical and the narrative formats. Let's first look at that parenthetical format. It's called the parenthetical format because all of your in-text citation information is found in parentheses marks. Now, the first element you will use is the name of the author. And in APA, you will only use the last name of your author, and unlike a reference citation, you will normally not use your first and middle initials. After the author's name, you will put a comma, and then you will put the year of the source publication. Now, even if your source has a month and a date in the reference citation, your in-text citation is only going to use a year. Now, after the date, you will place an ending parentheses, and that's it. Now, you need to place this citation as close as possible to the sentence in which you use this information. This will usually mean that your citation will go at the end of the sentence with the information. And the punctuation rules are different as well. Your punctuation for your sentence will go at the end of the citation and not before the citation. Now, this is the basic format that will likely cover 2/3 of your sources, but there are some situations where we have to make some changes. Now, the first situation we'll discuss is a source with more than one author. Now, if there's 2 authors, then you're going to put both authors' last name, again with no initials, and an ampersand between each of these authors' names. Now, unlike the reference citation, you will not use a comma before the ampersand. So, what if there's more than 2 authors? This becomes really easy. You list the first author and then put et al. Period, then place a comma and then the year of the publication. Et al. Is an abbreviation of the Latin term et alia, which means and the others. So what about group authors? Remember, a group author is when the source is offered as a work of an organization as a whole instead of individual. For a group author, you must provide the entire name of the organization the first time you cite that source. If you know you will cite the group again in the paper, then in this first citation you may add the group's initials in brackets like this. This allows you in later citations just use the abbreviation of the group and not its entire name. Now, in those cases in which a source does not have an author listed, just like in a references citation, you're going to use the title of the source instead. Now, if the title is italicized in the reference citation, like a book, then it would be italicized in the in-text citation. Now, if the title is not italicized in the reference citation, like you would see the title of a journal article, then you will put the title in quotation marks. Note that the comma between the title and the year of publication will be within those quotation marks. Now, if it's a long title, then you shorten it to just a few words. However, you want to make sure your shortened title is logical and easily recognizable by your reader when they go to look for it in the reference page. There may be a few times that you can have two sources by authors who have the same last name. For example, you can have one source by Sam Jones and another written by Leonard Jones. In this case, you will use the author's initials, but unlike a reference citation, the initials go before the last name, not after. So Sam Jones would be listed S. Jones and Linda Jones would be listed L. Jones. Now, the next situation you might find is if you have a source without a date. For these sources, you'll do exactly what we did in our reference citation, and you'll add a N.D. in small letters. Now, when you have a paragraph using several different sources, you want to be clear about what part of the paragraph goes to what source. This is where putting the citation after the sentence that is used is so important. Now, in some cases, a sentence may use information from multiple sources. Take this sentence, for example. Here you would list each source alphabetically, all within the same parentheses and separated by a semicolon. So that covers most of the situations for a parenthetical format of an in-text citation. Let's look at the narrative format. When we talk about a narrative format, we're talking about when we're actually using the name of the author in the sentence that we're writing. Take this sentence, for example. You'll notice I have already included in my text one of the two parts of APA's author date citation. I have Cooper's last name. So instead of adding his name again in the citation, all I need to do is add the date of the source in parentheses right after his name, like this. Now I've provided the required elements of the citation. In fact, there are some instances in which the name and the date of the publication are already included in the text. Here's another example. Here, both the date and the author are already included in the text, so no parentheses is actually necessary. Nor would I be in jeopardy of plagiarism because I have clearly attributed my source. Now, in these examples from Cooper and Carr, I have actually rewrote what they had in my own words. This is known as paraphrasing. Now, when you use sources in your paper, you should usually be paraphrasing that information, which is putting all that information into your own words while still attributing the ideas and the facts to the rightful source. Then there are direct quotations. This is when you use the exact words of an author. Now, I advise you to be extremely careful when you're using direct quotes. Many students way overuse direct quotes. You want to use a direct quote when it is how something was said that is important, not necessarily the information itself. If the way someone has phrased something is memorable or really couldn't be better phrased, that is when you use a direct quote. But you shouldn't use a direct quote to provide data or facts. You always want to paraphrase this type of information. Now, many instructors will limit both the length and the number of direct quotations that is allowed in your paper, so you want to make sure you understand your instructions before you begin writing. Also realize that direct quotations of more than 40 words must be formatted as a block quotation. Now, block quotations do not use quotation marks. Rather, the quotation will be set off in a new line, and the entire quotation will be indented by a ½ inch from the margin. Now, when you do include a direct quotation, you always want to use what is known as a signal phrase. Essentially, a signal phrase is the words that you use to be able to introduce a quotation to your reader. Here's some examples. Now, notice that the signal phrase can be either before or after the direct quote, and this is where we're going to put our narrative citation. Now, notice that direct quotations also require one more element to the citation, the page number from which you actually can find that exact quote. Now, page numbers can be used when citing a paraphrased sentence, but it is mandatory for a direct quotation. Now, the page number will normally be added after the quotation in parentheses. Now, if the quote was found on one page, you use a small p for page, followed by a period and the page number. Now, if the quotation goes over a couple pages, you'll use a small double P, followed by the period, and then the page numbers of the quote separated by a hyphen. Now, if your source doesn't have page numbers, you still need a way to be able to tell your reader where you got the information. There are several ways to do this. When citing a website, you might include the paragraph the quote was found. A presentation might be cited by the slide number. In a video, you could add the time that the quote appears. Now, if the source has a section heading, you can use the section title followed by the word section to make it clear to your reader where you got your source. Now, remember, whenever you use a direct quotation, you must use the exact words of the quote. However, you can add and even delete things for clarity as long as you do not change the meaning of the quotation. Take, for example, this sentence. From this quotation, it's not clear that they is actually referring to teachers. So what I can do is I can put the word teachers in brackets right after the word they. That way I provide clarity to the quote. And by using brackets, that it's understood that this is my addition. It is not found in the original quote. Likewise, sometimes there's a portion within a quote that is unnecessary for your purposes. If it does not change the meaning of the quote, you can delete a portion to be more concise. To indicate to your reader that you have deleted the section of the quote, you must insert an ellipsis in the place of the deleted text. An ellipsis is essentially 3 periods with a space between each period. Now here's the most important thing to understand about using a direct quotation. You must put the quote in quotation marks. If you use someone else's words and do not set them off in quotation marks, that is plagiarism. Even if you have an in-text citation, if you do not have quotation marks, your reader's going to believe that these are your words as you paraphrase the text. In other words, you have passed off the words of another person as your own, even if it is unintentional. Ladies and gentlemen, this is plagiarism. Remember Stephen Ambrose I talked about before? This is how he got in trouble. He provided the citation, but he did not have quotations. But unlike Stephen Ambrose, hopefully with the information I've given in this lesson, you will never be accused of plagiarism and you're going to have a successful research paper. All right, until next time, keep on learning.